Session 2 of the build of the 3D printed F1 car designed by Andy Cooke. Hello, this is VJ from Hearns Hobbies and welcome to the second part of the build I'm doing of the GP3D radio control car. So it's a 1/10 scale 3D printed bespoke design car by Andrew Cooke. So if you'd like to get one of these, just visit his website, just search GP3D and you'll be able to find one of these. But we're lucky enough to have one of these to build. And in the first session, I've actually built the front bulkhead. Big chunky piece of bulkhead here. We've got the micro servo in place and we have the steering column and that's been put into here. So just as I have on the manual here, front bulkhead. So we've gone through all these parts. This is all mounting up. This is doing the steering column. So we're up to the servo mechanism, preparing these components. Okay, so we're going to need these extensions here. So we've got this adapter, which is going to be a bit hard to see. Let's see if I can find got a bit of scrap white paper here. All right, let's do this. All right, so we've got those bits there. There's our bulkhead. I'm going to need this. There's another bearing. There's a plate insert. Oh, that's already in here, I think, is it? I've already got that in there. Okay, and then variety of screws. So I've got all the screws over here, which I'll pick out as I go. All right, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we've got our drill bits. Now, last week I wasn't very prepared. I didn't have my pin vise. So I've got a pin vise now. Just make sure I've got it on the right setting. Yeah, it's good, okay. Because basically, since these are 3D printed, the holes are not going to be bang on. They're going to be a little bit tight, and they'll just need to be opened up with a drill bit. And the drill bits are supplied in the kit as well. Okay, so we've got this section here. So we're just going to open this up a bit. So that's pretty open already. It's good. And we're just going to put through lock nut on one side and the 2x14, so that's going to be a long one. Okay, all right, so we've got that there. All right, so one side is going to be for the nut. Okay, so it's got a nut shape in it, so we'll press that in there. Oop. This is probably going to help if I have the screw in there. That'll line it all up. Okay, just got my driver. Okay, so I've just done it up a little bit because that's going to be clamping onto the servo. We'll do that all up tighter later. Plug the servo into your radio gear to set the neutral point. Oh, okay. I don't actually have any radio gear ready, so we'll probably revisit that later. I'm guessing that's fairly centered. I'm hoping it's centered, so we'll just build it as is and we'll fix it up later. Okay, so this is going to have to slide across. So paying attention to this particular section here. So this part is actually geared and it needs to be perpendicular to here to work correctly. Okay, so let's just fit this on here. All right, looks pretty good. Press it in place. All right, pretty happy with that. All right, so we've got it on. Okay, so note that it's not moved vertically. Okay, so we've got that angled in. Okay, ensure the steering column has a retaining grub screw pointing directly vertical, and we have that when you mesh it all up. All right, so take your time. So we've done that, and that's all good. All right. Now we're going to orient the servo bracing plate. Okay, so that's what we've got here. All right, so I've actually got this pressed into place already. So they were actually two separate components. Alright, so let's just make sure we've got the bearing in the right spot. So flange bearing goes through the front ear. And then that is mounted across here. Press over the steering column. Oh, those bearings come off. A bit of a tight fit. Alright, that's in now. Okay, so a 2x8 screwed into here. Alright, so we're just going to screw it into a point, just to hold it in place, not tight yet. Alright, so it's still loose. Okay, so I've got this flange screw here. Goes into this washer. And then this is fit and screwed into the servo. Okay, so I see, so it's going to align everything. Oh, there's a smaller driver. Was it? Yep, there's a smaller driver. Okay, so the insert is sitting into the servo brake plate, so tighten it up but not too tight. Okay, so sort of finger tight there. Check that everything matches the photos. Looks all pretty good. Okay, which means if we're happy with it, we will tighten this all up here. Alright, let's bang that together. Alright, nice and tight. Okay, so we've got the servo there, servo horn, which means, actually I should tighten this up as well. This is a clamping action for the servo horn, which is actually geared. Okay, that all looks pretty good. Alright, so we're going on to the next step. Servo mechanism. Okay, so that's going to be, we've got this collar here, and we need to cut the thread with a spare screw. So let me just empty out these spares over here. Now it's important to cut the threads because, like I said earlier, because it's 3D printed, some of these holes are going to be a little bit tight. And particularly when there's small grub screws are going into it, we just want to make sure there's not too much strain on those because the heads on those are quite fragile. Okay, so I'm just going to screw this in. Alright, so there's two holes here, so we'll do this side as well. Alright, so that feels pretty good. Now let me just make sure I've tapped this one as well. Pretty sure I did it earlier, but just to be sure. Okay, feels pretty good. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to put these grub screws into place. Oh, that's a bit too thick for that. I'm going to have to use a fine grub screw. Alright, so I'll put these in first. And want to put them in, but we don't want them protruding. Okay, so we want them in, but just not going through the other side. So we'll put both of these in. Okay, feels right. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to slide this coupler with a larger hex hole. That'll be this one here. Slide this over here. And we want that to match up. Probably got this screwed in a bit far away. Let's back this off a bit. All right, so it's in place. Okay, then we're just going to screw it in. Oh. So yeah, so there's a bit of a warning. If it feels tight, don't screw it all the way in. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to take this all the way out. I'm going to re-tap it, because I'm maybe just getting caught up with the other end. Just make sure it homes in really nicely. Okay, let's try it again. Now we do this because these grub screws can be quite fragile. They can get stripped out easily across the head. And if that happens, we do have spares, but it's good if we can get them in there without it having any trouble to begin with. Alright, so it's starting to feel a bit of resistance now. Oh, it's starting to strip. Alright, let's get that out. No, it's actually probably a bit tight. All right, let's see if that's going to survive. It's just poking out by a little bit, by about 1 mil. If it is a problem, I'll pull it out and I'll put in a fresh one. Okay, so from there, let's move on to the next part. Okay, so this is just a check, just make sure everything looks the same as the pictures. All looks pretty good, so let's move on. Oh, okay, so we're going back now. Let's go back. Right, let's go back here. Sort of lost my place. Alright, let's go back to the menu. Manual here, front bulkhead. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to the front shocks now. Okay, so that part is already done. Alright, let's go to shocks. Just got to find our shock bag. Alright, which is, that's a suspension, there's the shocks. Alright, so you got them all labelled up. Like so. Pull that screw back in there. Alright, so we've got a lot of little bits and pieces. We've got our 4 little collars here. So there's thicker ones and thinner ones. Ends, springs, bodies. These I'm not too sure. These are, what have we got here? Some bits of tubing. Okay. All right, so I'm going to need a bit of ball diff grease as well, which I don't have here at the moment. Let's just build it up, and I can always add that a bit later, I think. Oh, maybe not. That's the first thing you got to do. So put in a bit of grease inside the silicone tube. Don't pack it, just a small amount. I guess that's just to lubricate that point, just so it can rub in and out for the friction shock. Okay, well in that case, I think we're going to call this a quick session. I'm going to continue on with these shocks next time around and make sure I'm prepared with a bit of grease. Okay, so I think that is the end of part 2. So, alright, so part 2, we've basically finished off the front bulkhead. And we were about to get into the shocks, but the shocks will be happening in part 3. So, thanks for joining me for session 2 of the build of the 3D printed F1 car designed by Andy Cooke, and I welcome you to join me for session 3, where we'll continue on with the front shocks. Gotta make sure we've got some grease this time, and we'll continue building the car until it's finished, and then we'll see if we can get it running. So thanks again, see you next time.